Welcome to today's webcast. This call is being recorded. And now to begin the program, I'd like to introduce Chris Flack. Please go ahead.
Hey, Lynette, thank you so much, and welcome everybody in our audience to today's webcast, Microsoft TMG End of Life, How to Stay Secure, sponsored by Kemp. I'm Chris Flack with Redmond Magazine, and I'm here to be your host for today's webcast, so thank you all for joining us. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you for your time. A few quick things before we get started with today's presentation and introduce our speaker, just a few reminders for everybody in the audience. So first up, today's event is being recorded and archived for future viewing and listening purposes, and we'll send you a link within 24 to 48 hours after today's webcast where you can view the replay. We encourage you to share that link with coworkers, colleagues, friends, anybody who may be interested on today's topic. We greatly appreciate that. Also, today's webcast will have a Q&A at the end of it. However, we do encourage you at any point during today's presentation, if you have a question for our presenter, please feel free to enter it in the Ask a Question box, which appears on the left-hand side of your screen. It should say Q&A. But please feel free to put your question in there, hit submit. It'll be sent off to myself and the speaker, and at the end of the presentation today, we'll hopefully get to everybody's questions and get out all the answers. Briefly, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today's webcast. His name is Jung. He's a research analyst at Kemp Technologies. He is part of the Strategic Alliance team at Kemp and acts as a technical lead on many of the partner-driven opportunities. Prior to Kemp, Kurt has spent most of his working career as a consultant helping customers deploy technologies to support their business. His primary focus is around messaging and collaboration. And I've got to talk to Kurt over the past couple of days, and he seems like a really great guy, and I have a feeling he's going to give everybody a really awesome webcast today. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand everything over to Kurt so that way he can get started with his agenda and get away with his webcast. So Kurt, why don't you take the floor, my friend?
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Chris. Once again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thanks for joining our webcast. As Chris just mentioned, prior to Kemp, I was out in the field deploying, and migrating mostly Microsoft solutions such as Exchange and Link. Did a little bit of some SharePoint and actually quite a bit of Office 365 and ADFS. So during that time, I became pretty familiar with the Threat Management Gateway as well as its predecessor ISA. So today we'll be discussing, a really great option on where to go since we're now forced to say goodbye to our friend TMG. Okay, so let's take a look at the agenda. We're going to, kind of have a quick overview about the Threat Management Gateway, some of the things it did, some of the roles it played. We'll then jump into what Kemp brings to the table with the LoadMaster Edge Security Pack, or our ESP. Next, we'll discuss our Application Firewall Pack, or AFP. This is our Web Application Firewall. And then finally, we will jump into a demo and show you how to set this up, what it looks like, and what the user experience is. Okay. So I guess it's hard to say don't panic, when you see an image such as this, but, let's look. There definitely are positives, and we have replacement options. But before we get into that, let's just take a minute to discuss some of the deployment scenarios for TMG. TMG, it wore a lot of hats, just to name a few. Some deployed as a forward or an outbound proxy for our end users accessing the internet. Some deployed as a reverse proxy in the perimeter to protect our applications on the internal network. Some used as a VPN for client access or site-to-site. Some actually deployed as their actual firewall. Now, it did a few other things, and sometimes a combination of these roles. Today we're going to focus on one of the more popular roles, and that's the reverse proxy solution and, where we can go from here. So as you all know, TMG mainstream support ended a little more than a month ago. So if you've not kind of made a decision on a replacement yet, we have a great solution for you. Okay, I just want to take a moment to talk a little bit about Kemp Technologies. For those of you who are not familiar with Kemp, we develop load balancers and application delivery controllers. We offer solutions based either on hardware, virtual, bare metal, or cloud. We've been around since 2000. We have over 26,000 worldwide deployments. And as you can see from the slide, we've been deployed with many Microsoft workloads, among other solutions. Whether you're on-premise, whether you're in the cloud, or running in a hybrid environment, we kind of have all the bases covered there. Also, we have features such as geo-enabled load masters, right, or what's referred to as global server load balancing, or GSLB, to add that site resilience in the event you lose your data center and need to fail over to like a remote site or something like that. That site resilience can be a remote data center, as you can see in this slide, or you can leverage Microsoft Azure for certain workloads as well. And then there's situations where you may need to have that site failover, but also run your application kind of an active-active state, right? And you could do that as well with Geo based on users' proximity. Okay, so the Kemp LoadMaster feature in regards to the replacement I'd like to start off with today is our Edge Security Pack, or ESP. Right, this feature was introduced to kind of fill that gap of the threat management gateway. And since inherently as an application delivery controller, we're also a reverse proxy, and from the prior slide showing all of the Microsoft workloads, it really makes sense to leverage features such as like single sign-on, right? And let's say you're remote and you access, Exchange Web App. You get the forms-based authentication that's presented by the Kemp LoadMaster. Enter your credentials and log in. You're going through your email. You open up an email which has a link to a document that's stored in, say, a SharePoint document library. I mean, the last thing you want to do really is enter your credentials again to access that document. So that with single sign-on allows you to enter your credentials once and then access other applications that are published through the LoadMaster, right? I mean, that's really the experience that we're all expecting these days. And as I mentioned before, I spent a bit of time consulting, and when we're deploying solutions that included TMG with their forms-based authentication, I'd be asked about whether or not the form can be customized with the customer logo, color schemes, things like that. As we all know, this was definitely possible in TMG. So with Kemp LoadMaster, we're also providing this functionality. And later on in the demo, I'll kind of just show you how really simple Kemp has made this to do this customization of the forms. So when we're doing things like, forms-based authentication, we need to have options, right, on what types of pre-authentication we can use. Obvious options like, LDAP, I mean, those are always available, but also leveraging methods such as Radius, RSA, certificate, whether you're using the client certificates from your internal CA or maybe smart card authentication, common access cards, things like that. Now, we look at these authentication methods as kind of the client side, or in our case, the client to the LoadMaster, right? But, what about the LoadMaster to our application servers? We can leverage and sometimes even require, for example, with the certificate authentication, is the use of KCD, right? So we're providing that functionality as well. I mean, the threat management gateway as a reverse proxy was responsible for, kind of providing that extra layer of security to lock down your application. I mean, with ESP, we're adding a lot of these features as well. Features like permitted groups in combination with our pre-authentication, right? This allows you to require that a user be, say, a member of a specific group or a team before they even attempt to access the application on the inside, right? I mean, this security feature alone carries a ton of weight. Also, locking down the application to specific URLs in virtual directories are going to kind of reduce that attack surface on your workload. And, soft lockout, right? So having the ability to set parameters on, how many incorrect passwords will be allowed before the account is locked out, right? A really nice feature of this, of course, is we're locking the user out at the LoadMaster, right? We're not locking out the Active Directory account. So, if someone's outside, trying to gain access to your account, this only affects the applications that are published through that LoadMaster, right? So access to your VPN or any other line of business application, I mean, all that stuff stays unaffected. So it's obviously a good feature to have. And we always need logging, right? Whether you're troubleshooting access to the published application, or you're trying to uncover why that user is continually getting that soft lockout, this is where you need to look, right? So once again, whether it's an actual connection or a specific user, we're capturing all this information for you. Okay, so you may ask, what if I need, more security than the threat management gateway was providing, right? So once again, Kemp has you covered with that as well. Our Web Application Firewall, we refer to it as our Application Firewall Pack, or AFP. This is built on Mod Security, which is the most deployed Web Application Firewall engine. You can configure automatic updates for commercial rules. These are provided by TrustWave. They're a leading security service provider. Right, so some of the security features AFP is going to add, right, is the inspection for the OWASP top 10. We'll do some data loss prevention on both inbound and outbound traffic, compliance for organizations that accept credit cards, right, and therefore requiring the PCI, the data security standard. Or you may require some custom rules for your application. For due to compliance or anything, right? So having the ability to add these to the engine and take action on that traffic, right? So you'll find the reference manual for this for Mod Security on GitHub, which has all the options for creating these custom rules. And once you start going through this guide, you'll really find that the possibilities are endless on what you can do with this with the application firewall pack. Okay, so here's a quick little visual of AFP, right? And we have our non-web traffic, right, which is being blocked at our external firewall. We have legitimate traffic, which is sent, through the LoadMaster to our application server. And then finally, we have some sort of an attack, or maybe it's a custom rule in which, typically would bypass your external firewall, but is being blocked by the LoadMaster with AFP. And we'll take a look at this these custom rules and things in our demo. Okay, so speaking of demo, let's kind of jump in and take a look to see what we got here.
While Kurt gets his demo set up, just a quick reminder for everybody, if you do have a question, please feel free to enter it in the Q&A box on your console, and we'll get to your question at the end of today's webcast. And also, if you want a copy of the slides, just send a message in the chat box, and I will try to get them to you at the end of the webcast today. But I'll let Kurt get to his screen share because he is up and running, and you're looking good, Kurt, so go ahead.
Okay, great. So here's our LoadMaster, and we'll kind of take a look at some of the settings in here. First thing we're going to do is we're going to drop down into virtual services, and we're going to look at our SSO domains. So we have a few domains set up on here. We have both the client side and the server side. Let's kind of jump into the form SSO domain. So we're doing it's an LDAP. We have our LDAP server, our domain. We have our soft lockout settings here. So we're doing 4 attempts. And we have our timeout. We have our public and private session timeouts as well. And then down here, you can see we have our blocked users, which, if someone was blocked, you can go into the SSO domain and release that user. If they just happen to forget their password 4 times, you can, kind of go and reset that account. Another thing that you'll see in the SSO is the ability for the image sets, right? So we're talking before about customizing that form. So we have the ability to upload image sets, which we can browse over here. We have our tar file with our fictional company, Kemptoso. So we'll go ahead and upload that. Just upload this image set. And we'll take a look at what that image set looks like a little bit later in the demo of how to kind of, alter it and make it your own. So from the single sign-on configuration, we'll jump into the virtual services, right? So this is where really we're setting up all of our virtual IP addresses and what services. So in this case, for this demo, we have Exchange 2013 as our virtual service. And as you can see, we have 2 virtual services. One is just a simple redirect from 80 to 443. The second one actually consists of a virtual service and multiple sub-virtual services. So this virtual service was actually created with one of our templates, which is the Exchange 2013 HTTPS re-encrypt with ESP. So what the template does is it creates all of this for you. So all you really need to go in is kind of go in and tweak the settings a little bit, and all of the rest of the configuration of these virtual services are done for you, and it really takes minutes instead of hours to set this up. So it's a really nice feature. So let's jump into we'll look at the Outlook Web App sub-virtual service. So within this, you'll see we have our ESP options, which is enabled. So within ESP, we have our logging, right? So we're basically doing all logging, both connection, user, and security. We have our SSO domain that we were looking at before, our Kemp demo form SSO domain. And then you have, we're doing forms-based, but you can do basic client or just delegate the server, which in that case you're bypassing the pre-authentication. We have our allowed virtual hosts, so you can add multiple URLs, auto-discover, in our case it's exch.kempdemo.com. We have our allowed virtual directories, and since we're doing the sub-virtual services, this particular one is only allowing the /OWA virtual directory. We have our pre-authentication excluded directories. Right, this is for some of the apps for like Outlook and things like that, like Bing Maps and suggested meetings. When users are using that, you don't want them to be prompted with a form, right? So what you want to do is you want to bypass the pre-authentication for that particular user account, the system account, right? TMG did this. They had an additional rule that was placed before the OWA rule. So again, if someone was accessing that virtual directory, it would be excluded. We just kind of put it right in the ESP options. We have our permitted groups that we were discussing before, our image set, which we'll take a look at in a bit. You have some greeting messages, log off string, and then we have other things like our user session, cookies, and things like that, as well as our server authentication. So let me go ahead and launch. So we have our form here. I'm actually going to open up two separate sessions, and we'll do that as part of the when we start looking at the Web Application Firewall. But as you can see, we have the Kemp default form, right? So as before, we went in and we actually set up and uploaded that Kemptoso image set, right? So what I can do is I can go into the authentication proxy. I can modify this under ESP options, and then we have our image set. I can go ahead and select that Kemptoso image set. Go back to our sessions here. And I can, again, customize this. So this image set took me about 2 minutes to create. Certainly not a whole lot of customization. But what I can show you is you can download these. You can download this package from Kemp, and all it is really is a bunch of GIFs, right? So we have our top, our bottom, you have left and right. You have the style sheet CSS. We have the HTML page, which you can go in there and do some customization. So you can get, pretty fancy with the form that you want to have for your particular company. Again, for demo purposes, I just kind of threw this together and just dropped a couple images in there. So let's log in. Okay, so now that we're logged in, let's go back and let's take a look at our Web Application Firewall. So under our virtual services, we have our WAF settings, right? So within here, we have our automated WAF rule updates, which again are being downloaded and automatically installed at the specific time that I request. I also installed a custom rule, right? So I have the option to install a custom rule and then also install data files that could be used with this custom rule. If you have some sort of a text file which has IP addresses that need to be looked at or something like that that you're trying to reference, you can actually upload that associated data file. So let's take a look at this custom file. So it's a pretty, can't see the, that up. Okay, so it's a pretty simple rule. What we're doing is we're trying to block all access to the ECP virtual directory from any IP address other than this 66.43.75.162. And then we're also logging all requests, and we're putting ECP access denied. It's a chained rule, so we're kind of looking at two first the URI and then the remote address. So let's go to our virtual service, and we'll go ahead and we will modify this. We can go into WAF options. We can enable that. And we're going to take the block ECP custom rule and apply it to our WAF options. Now, assuming I have that IP address correct, this browser on the right side here is my browser, which has that IP address, that 66 IP address. This browser on the left is from our remote site, which is coming from a different IP address. So this one on the left is actually being blocked by our WAF rule. So again, it's a very simple rule, not doing anything too fancy, but as I said, with that reference guide, you'll see there's just a ton of things that you can do with these rules. But yet again, OA still works for both of these. So again, that rule is very specific, looking for a specific IP and a specific virtual directory. So that kind of wraps up our demo. What I want to kind of say here is if you're looking to, kind of try this out and see for yourself, the ESP or really any of the functionality that the Kemp LoadMaster provides, we have a few options for you to try this out, right? We have a 30-day trial that you can download from our website. We also have, for anyone that's Microsoft MCP, we do provide an NFR license, right? And then finally, we also have a free load balancer, right? So you can go to freeloadbalancer.com and you can download a free load balancer. Now, the free load balancer, again, there's some limitations on that. There's basically, we're only providing 20 megabits of throughput for that, as well as the MCP NFR. We have, that's a VLM 2000, which is actually 2 gigabits of throughput. And then the 30-day, again, that's a VLM 5000. You can do 5 gigabits of throughput. So depending on what you're looking for and what you really want to test out, we definitely give you some options before you need to purchase. But you can definitely try that stuff out and go to kemptechnologies.com and download what you need. So Chris, that kind of wraps up the demo portion. If we want to kind of get into any kind of questions, we could do that.
Yeah, thanks. We actually have a ton of questions from the audience, so I would like to get to them. Just a reminder, though, if you do have a question at this time, please feel free to enter your question via the Ask a Question box, which appears on the left-hand side of your console. Okay, so first question here is coming from Sammy, and he's saying, what is required to have a KEMP Edge Security Pack on an existing KEMP LM device? Can this be deployed on any LM model?
Yes, the Edge Security Pack can be deployed on any LM model. There's no limitation for the Edge Security Pack.
All right. Got a question here.
No, the web application.
Yeah.
Yes, Bhargav.
Sorry, this is Bhargav. Hey, Kurt. So I just wanted to add to your answer about the Edge Security Pack. It is true that it can be deployed on any LM model. The only caveat I would throw in here is I really hope you don't, but if you do have one of the very old models that are running any version 6 or earlier of LoadMaster, then I would suggest you contact support to ensure that you have a supported model that can run and sustain the requirements of ESP in order to run it. It's not as simple as just applying the firmware update. Now, if you are on version 7.0 or above, you can certainly go ahead and get the latest firmware and apply it, and that would work.
Excellent.
All
Thanks,
right,
Bhargav.
we got an. Oh, no problem. Thanks, Bart. And everybody there, that's Bhargav. He works with Kemp as well. He's here to help with answering some questions that we have in today's webcast. So we have a question here. This one comes from Tony, and he's asking, excuse me, I would be interested to hear your thoughts on whether the LB should be attached directly to the Internet with an external IP address, or whether you still recommend hiding it behind a firewall.
That's a great question. You can absolutely put it behind the firewall for, again, for specific workloads and things like that. If there's ever a requirement where you need to have, and it can still be behind the firewall, where you need to have a public IP address on that for, things such as link and other workloads that require that, then you're going to have that public IP address. But yeah, I mean, you should always, best practice to kind of keep the LoadMaster behind the firewall at, any situation you can.
Question here, can I have multiple permitted groups added to ESP?
Yes, you can have multiple permitted groups added to ESP. When you're adding multiple groups to ESP, what you're going to want to do is you want to separate them. A lot of our settings are typically space separated, right? But with a permitted group, you want to use semicolon separated because, as we know, Active Directory groups can have a space in the name, and we don't want to have any confusion on where the name starts and where that name ends. So all of our permitted groups in ESP are semicolon separated.
Somebody was curious. You said that this was about malware. What about spam?
About spam.
Yeah,
well, we are not
spam.
No, I mean we're not a spam appliance. We do have, as part of ESP, you can actually enable ESP on SMTP traffic, but we're not doing any spam-specific filtering on that. What we're doing is looking for permitted groups and things like that. So we do have some features for SMTP when we're talking about ESP, but nothing for spam directly.
Question here. Does sorry.
Yeah, Bhargav?
Sorry. To add to Kurt's note, similar to TMG, we don't intend to take over all the functions that were never served by TMG either, of becoming an anti-spam appliance and such. What we are providing is functionality that is relevant to both load balancing and application serving at layer 7 and layer 4. Like Kurt mentioned, we provide basic functionality that adds some value to using LoadMaster to filter SMTP traffic, but we don't really intend to or become or replace the anti-spam in your environment.
Question here. Can Kemp LoadMaster do both high availability and site resilience?
Yes, you can set up the LoadMaster in a HA pair within the same physical site, so you can have that high availability with the LoadMaster in a active-passive situation. And then the site resilience, as we talked about before, is our global server load balancing, or GSLB, in which case you can have a remote site and have a kind of a pair, right? So you're kind of setting up, you can have a pair in a remote site, a pair in your local site, and set up that GSLB or that global balancing between those two sites. So we're doing both.
Another question here, can I do layer 4 load balancing for Exchange and still use ESP?
Okay, so no. So the answer is actually we do layer 4 load balancing, no problem. We could do that all day and night. But when you're enabling ESP, we need to be doing layer 7 load balancing for that, so we can terminate that traffic, do that pre-authentication, re-encrypt that traffic, and send it to our server. So that we need to be at layer 7 for ESP.
Speaking of ESP, does ESP work with any protocols other than HTTP or HTTPS?
Well, yeah, as I mentioned before, we do have ESP, which is available for SMTP, so we can actually enable that, and we have a template for Exchange SMTP with ESP, and that will allow you to do more permitted groups and things like that. I mean, obviously, there isn't really any authentication or anything in that sense, but we do enable, as Bhargav said, some limited SMTP filtering and things like that.
A bunch of people had asked, is there a link or a site somebody could visit for a free trial or for more information?
Yeah, I mean, you can always go to kemptechnologies.com, right, and from there you go to products, and you'll see you can download your trial right from the products, your virtual LoadMaster product page, and the free load balancer is freeloadbalancer.com, and again, it's branded Kemp 100%, and you can obtain your free load balancer from freeloadbalancer.com. And with the MCP, there's a link, and I'm not sure, I have to find the link for the MCP where you can actually request your MCP NFR license for the virtual LoadMaster. That I don't have handy, but we could certainly send that out. That's not a problem.
Yeah, you know what, actually, Kurt, if you send that to me after the webcast, I could include that in a follow-up email to everybody so that way they have it. So that'd be great.
Yeah, that's great. Perfect.
Yeah, excellent. No, excellent. And, yeah, thank you so much, Kurt. We've got through a bunch of questions, so thank you so much. You did an excellent job presenting and an excellent job with your demo. We had over 200 people show up today, so didn't want to make you nervous and let you know earlier, but you had a really great turnout. And a big thank you to everybody in the audience for joining us as well. Thank you for showing up. Really appreciate you all taking your time to join myself and Kurt today for today's webcast. Today's webcast, Microsoft TMG End of Life, How to Stay Secure, has been sponsored by Kemp and brought to you by Redmond Magazine and RedmondMag.com. But really, thank you, Kurt, for your presentation, and thank you, everybody, for joining us. We hope you have a great rest of your day.